The shuttle's hull shimmered with reflected starlight as final fueling lines detached one by one, each metallic click echoing through the launch bay like a polite reminder that my time here was finished. 1 year inside the crystalline capital of an empire that once considered humanity an amusing biological rumor. And now my departure required 3 committees, 2 ceremonial blessings, and a form acknowledging that I had not stolen any planetary secrets in my luggage. I had signed that last document with exaggerated innocence. Above the bay, transparent arches of living crystal refracted the planet's twin suns into fractured rainbows. When I first arrived, the sight had given me vertigo. Now it felt almost domestic, like an overly ambitious greenhouse. I had memorized the rhythm of the city's quantum transit streams, the soft hum beneath the streets where their planetary defense lattice pulsed like a sleeping mind. The scientists had tried explaining it to me several times. I nodded wisely each time and later compared it, in private, to a nervous system built by architects with a fondness for impossible geometry. My mission had been simple in theory: secure an alliance, ensure mutual defense, return home. Earth Command had already transmitted my debrief schedule. There would be medals, interviews, and at least one uncomfortable question about whether the alien cuisine was spicy. I planned to answer that it occasionally attempted murder. A small procession gathered near the shuttle ramp. At its center stood the Queen. She appeared almost human at a distance, tall, composed, her expression carved from quiet authority, but the elongated curve of her ears, elegant and unmistakable, framed her face like living sigils of another lineage. Light traced along the fine edges as she regarded the launch platform. We had navigated a year of negotiations together. Trade corridors reopened. Border skirmishes cooled. Cultural misunderstandings reduced from existential threats to academic debates. Once, during a tense council session, I had compared our species, diplomatic styles to different dance traditions. She had not understood the metaphor, but she had appreciated the audacity. I offered a respectful nod from the base of the ramp. "Your Majesty, I promise not to destabilize any interstellar balances on my way out." One corner of her mouth shifted, not quite a smile, but close enough to be dangerous. The launch countdown initiated. Engines warmed. I allowed myself one final glance at the crystalline city, at the alien world that had slowly ceased feeling alien. Then every console in the bay flickered. Launch clearance revoked. Override. Royal authority. The engines powered down with a disappointed sigh, like a machine denied a long-anticipated vacation. I stared at the display, then at the Queen. She did not raise her voice. She did not gesture. She simply said, "You will come with me." The walk from the launch bay to the inner palace corridors felt longer than any negotiation session. We had survived together. Royal guards moved ahead of us in measured silence, their armor humming faintly with embedded energy fields. I resisted the urge to ask whether this was an arrest, a promotion, or an especially dramatic farewell tour. "If this is about the dessert incident," I said carefully, keeping pace beside her, "I maintain that it was sentient and provoked me first." She did not slow. "This is not about dessert. That narrows it down only slightly." We entered a restricted transit chamber. The doors sealed behind us with a soft harmonic tone. Beneath the floor I felt it again, the planetary lattice, a vibration too subtle to hear, yet impossible to ignore. When I first arrived, their scientists had celebrated my tolerance for proximity to the core systems. Most visiting diplomats experienced migraines, disorientation, or existential doubt. I experienced mild curiosity and an unfortunate craving for caffeine. The platform descended. "You were preparing to leave," she said. "That was the general idea. Earth tends to notice when its envoys vanish. And if your departure endangered this world." I glanced at her. Up close, she was even more striking, features precise, gaze steady, those long ears angled slightly back, not in hostility but in calculation. I was under the impression the planetary defense network predates my species discovering fire, I replied. It does. Then I'm confident it can survive my absence. I am not, despite rumors, structurally essential. The chamber opened into a circular hall lined with suspended holographic projections. The lattice appeared as a shifting sphere of light, threads of quantum probability weaving and unweaving in constant motion. She approached the display. With a subtle gesture, sections dimmed, others flickered erratically. This instability began during your first month here, she said. It stabilized when you entered the central synchronization hub. I folded my arms. Correlation is not causation. I also began drinking your mineral infusion that month. You entered the hub again during the solar flare event. I remembered that night. Alarms, emergency protocols. I had been ushered inside as a precaution while their engineers recalibrated the outer grid. The cascade failure probability dropped from 42% to near zero while you were present, she continued. I stared at the shifting light. You are suggesting, I said slowly, that my mere existence functions as planetary maintenance. She met my gaze. Your neural variability appears uniquely compatible with our quantum architecture. I exhaled. So I'm not a diplomat, I'm a firmware patch. For now, she said evenly, you are the difference between stability and vulnerability. I tried to laugh. It came out thinner than intended. That, I said, is not in my job description. I circled the holographic sphere once, as if a different angle might transform planetary dependence into a clerical misunderstanding. Threads of light tightened and loosened in quiet patterns, responding to inputs far beyond my comprehension. You're certain this isn't symbolic? I asked. Perhaps the system just enjoys my personality. It does not experience enjoyment, she replied. That's disappointing. I was hoping to negotiate better terms. She extended her hand toward the projection. A cluster of luminous strands dimmed, their oscillations slipping out of phase. When you leave the capital perimeter, these fluctuations increase. Maybe it misses my footsteps. She ignored that. Our engineers attempted to replicate your neural signature. That sounds invasive. It was theoretical. Good, I prefer my brain uncopied. She shifted the display. A simulation appeared, my shuttle departing orbit. The lattice destabilized in cascading ripples, probability curves bending toward failure thresholds. I felt my humor retreat slightly. And the worst-case scenario. Defense blind spots, orbital shields misaligned. A vulnerability, window measurable in minutes. Minutes are very fashionable in interstellar warfare, I said quietly. Silence settled between us, not hostile but heavy. You brought stability during the flare, she continued. Your cognitive patterns, nonlinear, adaptive interfaced with the lattice's uncertainty algorithms. It compensated around you. I improvise under stress, I said, mostly because I forget the official procedure. That improvisation prevented collapse. I studied her expression, composed, controlled, yet beneath it something more personal. Why tell me now? I asked. Why not quietly insist I extend my stay for diplomatic reasons? Her long ears angled slightly forward, an almost imperceptible shift. Because this is not solely technical, she said. Our people are aware of the stabilization events. They associate them with you. That's unwise. I once locked myself out of my own quarters. You are seen as constant. I let out a short breath. I've been called many things. Constant is new. The council debates contingency plans, she said. Some propose restricting your departure. I raised an eyebrow, imprisonment framed as gratitude. I rejected that approach. Comforting. She stepped closer to the projection. The light reflected across her features, almost human, almost familiar, yet undeniably other. I will not command you to remain, she said, but understand the reality. Your departure alters more than diplomatic optics. You're asking me to choose between my world and yours, I said. I am asking you to recognize that the boundary between them is no longer clean. I looked again at the lattice. at the subtle tremors rippling outward from simulated absence. I came here to secure. They escorted me, politely, which is always more intimidating than force, back toward the upper terraces. The council had been informed, though not officially. Information here traveled the way light moved through their crystal architecture. Refracted, reshaped, impossible to fully contain. So the options are, I said as we walked, I leave and risk planetary instability, or I stay and risk Earth assuming I've defected. That is an inelegant summary, she replied. I specialize in inelegant summaries. We paused at a balcony overlooking the transit streams. Energy currents flowed beneath transparent walkways, starships gliding in disciplined arcs overhead. When I first arrived, every vessel in orbit had felt like a reminder that I was temporary. Now they looked uncomfortably like responsibilities. My command expects my return, I said. If I vanish without explanation, they will interpret it strategically. You may inform them, she said, and tell them what? Dear Earth, I've become an organic compatibility patch for alien quantum infrastructure. Kindly adjust foreign policy accordingly. Her gaze did not waver. You underestimate your world's adaptability. That's my job, professional skepticism. A notification flickered across my wrist console. Earth Command requesting final launch confirmation. The countdown had resumed in standby mode. They believed the delay ceremonial. I muted the alert. You said the council proposed restricting my departure, I said. How divided are they? 17 favor compulsory retention. 9 oppose. The remainder are undecided. I appreciate being the subject of parliamentary math. You are not a subject, she said evenly. You are a factor. Marginally better. A faint tremor passed through the terrace floor. Subtle but deliberate, she glanced toward the horizon. The lattice is fluctuating again, she said, because I'm emotionally conflicted. Because your shuttle systems are cycling. I let out a breath. So even preparing to leave agitates your planet. In measurable increments. I leaned against the railing. This is absurd. I trained for negotiation, cultural exchange, crisis mediation. No one mentioned planetary symbiosis. Perhaps they lacked imagination. That seems unfair. Humans have excellent imagination. We simply prefer it in fiction. She studied me for a long moment. If you remain, we will formalize your role. You will not be hidden. And if I refuse, I will not imprison you. But the instability remains. Yes, I nodded slowly. You realize this is the worst kind of decision. No villains. No obvious betrayal, just consequence. Leadership rarely offers cleaner choices, she said. Another alert pulsed on my console. Final departure window approaching. I looked at the city, at the people who had stopped seeing me as foreign months ago, at a world whose survival now seemed inconveniently entangled with my brain. I was supposed to be finished, I said quietly. Her long ears tilted slightly, almost sympathetically. Were you? She asked. I requested access to the central synchronization hub. If I was going to be accused of planetary codependency, I preferred evidence. The engineers hesitated only briefly before granting clearance. Apparently, once you are categorized as structural variable, doors open with unsettling efficiency. The descent shaft carried us deep beneath the Capitol. Layers of crystalline infrastructure gave way to denser, older architecture, the original lattice core. The air hummed with contained energy, not loud but insistent, like a thought that refused to be ignored. You understand, I said to the Queen as we stepped onto the inner platform, that if this ends with me glowing ominously, I will file a complaint. You will not glow, she replied. That is exactly what someone expecting glow would say. At the center of the chamber hovered the lattice interface node, a suspended sphere of interlocking light matrices. Threads extended outward into darkness, linking city to orbit, orbit to defense arrays, arrays to planetary mantle. I approached slowly. The first time I had stood here was during the solar flare emergency. I remembered the alarms, the hurried instructions, The engineer's disbelief that I remained conscious while standing within the synchronization field. Activate passive sync, she instructed. The engineers complied. A subtle pressure formed behind my eyes. Not pain, alignment. Patterns brushed against the edges of my thoughts as if the lattice were sampling without intrusion. My pulse steadied rather than accelerated. That's familiar, I said. The projection screens around us shifted. Probability graphs smoothed. Fluctuation curves stabilized. One engineer made a soft, involuntary sound of relief. Quantify change, the Queen ordered. Instability reduced by 30%, the engineer replied, continuing downward. I exhaled slowly. So I walk into a room and your planet relaxes. In essence, she said, that is the most stressful compliment I've ever received. The lattice pulsed again. I felt it respond, not to deliberate effort but to stray thought. I imagined improvising during negotiations, redirecting tense arguments with humor, adjusting mid-sentence when cultural nuance shifted. The sphere brightened subtly. Cognitive flexibility, one engineer whispered. It integrates with adaptive defense algorithms. I'm not doing anything, I said. You are thinking, the Queen replied. That's generally unavoidable. Another set of graphs stabilized completely. I felt no loss of self, no merging, only resonance. The lattice did not overwrite me. It compensated around me, as if my unpredictability filled gaps in its ancient architecture. I stepped back, the fluctuations returned, slight but measurable. You see, she said quietly. Yes, I answered. Silence settled over the chamber, not oppressive, conclusive. I could remain temporarily, I said at last. Assist your engineers in developing a sustainable solution. You believe there is one. I refuse to accept that I am the galaxy's only walking patch update. A faint shift touched her expression. You would delay your return. I would renegotiate the timeline, I corrected. Diplomats are allowed to do that. The engineers exchanged glances, hope mixing with calculation. I looked again at the lattice. I will not be compelled, I said. You are not, she replied, but I will not ignore this either. The sphere pulsed once more, steady, waiting. So was I. Earth Command did not appreciate renegotiated timelines. The moment I transmitted a priority update, my console filled with cascading requests for clarification, justification, and what one admiral delicately termed, reassurance that you have not been strategically absorbed. I am not absorbed, I muttered, pacing the secure chamber allocated for interstellar communications. I am temporarily integrated. The Queen stood across from me, silent but attentive, her long ears angled toward the projection of Earth's command emblem rotating in midair. You are extending your stay indefinitely. The Admiral asked through the encrypted channel. Not indefinitely, I replied. Strategically extended. The planetary defense infrastructure here exhibits a unique compatibility with human cognitive variants. There was a pause long enough to be historically significant. Clarify, the Admiral said. I help stabilize their quantum lattice. By doing what? Existing. Another pause. I imagined analysts scrambling to determine whether this was satire. You are telling me, the Admiral continued carefully, that your brain is functioning as alien infrastructure. That is an inelegant summary, I said automatically, then glanced at the Queen. But broadly accurate. The Queen stepped forward. We are prepared to formalize his role within a joint research directive. Transparency between our worlds will be maintained. Earth Command's projection flickered slightly as transmission lag adjusted across light years. This alters the balance of the alliance, the Admiral said. It strengthens it, I countered. Our cooperation now operates at the structural level. And if you are removed from the equation, I hesitated. We are developing redundancy protocols. Are you indispensable? No one is indispensable, I said, merely inconvenient to replace. The Queen's gaze shifted subtly at that. Silence followed, then. Your return is postponed pending further review. You will transmit daily stability reports. Yes, Admiral. The channel closed. I exhaled slowly. That could have gone worse. It did not appear smooth, the Queen observed. That was smooth by human standards. We relocated to the research wing overlooking the lattice's auxiliary nodes. Engineers, human and alien now working side by side, analyzed neural mapping interfaces. My cognitive patterns were being studied not for replication, but for translation into algorithmic flexibility. So, I said, reviewing a stream of probability models, you're teaching your planet to improvise. In simplified terms, one engineer replied. Careful, I said. Improvisation occasionally includes bad decisions and regrettable metaphors. We will filter those, the engineer said dryly. Over the next cycles, controlled synchronization sessions became routine. I would enter the hub, align briefly, then step back while hybrid algorithms attempted to sustain stability without me. Progress was incremental. Instability spikes shortened. Recovery times improved. Yet each time I withdrew completely, the lattice still reached, subtle fluctuations rippling outward as if aware of absence. You feel it, the Queen said during one session. Yes, I admitted. It's like stepping out of a conversation mid-sentence. Do you regret remaining? I considered the question. My mission parameters changed, I said. That doesn't mean they ended. Her expression softened, not relief but recognition. Was your mission ever solely political? She asked. I looked at the shifting lattice, at the joint research teams, at a world adjusting itself around an improbable connection. I'm beginning to suspect, I replied, that it was always about more than treaties. The lattice pulsed, steady but attentive. So did we. The first time the lattice stabilized without me inside the synchronization field, no one applauded. They stared at the projections as if afraid sound might disturb the balance. Probability curves held steady. Fluctuation spikes corrected themselves through the hybrid algorithms our teams had built, alien quantum architecture guided by modeled human cognitive variants. Improvisation translated into code. Well, I said carefully, either it's working or the planet has decided to humor us. An engineer allowed a restrained breath of laughter. Stability holding at 98% autonomy. The Queen looked at the sphere of light, then at me. And the remaining 2%? Margin for personality, I replied. Over the following cycles, the system endured stress tests, simulated solar storms, orbital disruptions, even mock hostile incursions projected through the defense grid. Each time the lattice adapted, not perfectly, not instantly, but independently. Earth Command's observers monitored every transmission. Their tone shifted from suspicion to reluctant admiration. A joint directive was ratified. Shared research, shared oversight, no unilateral dependence. I was formally designated liaison to the Interwoven Defense Initiative, a title far more dignified than walking patch. You are no longer required for continuous synchronization, the chief engineer informed me during the final evaluation. I was never required, I said, merely statistically persuasive. The Queen's long ears tilted slightly. That subtle gesture I had learned meant approval restrained by protocol. Later, we stood again on the terrace overlooking the transit streams. My shuttle remained in orbit, no longer poised for immediate departure, no longer symbol of escape. You may return to Earth, she said. The lattice will endure. I know, and yet you hesitate. I negotiated an alliance, I replied. I helped prevent a planetary vulnerability window measured in fashionable minutes. It seems inefficient to vanish immediately after. You would divide your time. Yes, Earth remains my home. This world is no longer foreign. She studied me in silence. When you first arrived, she said, you positioned yourself as temporary. That was the plan. And now, I considered the year. The misunderstandings turned collaboration. The crisis turned integration. The humor that had once been defense becoming bridge. Now I understand that missions evolve, I said. Sometimes the objective is not departure but connection. A transport signal chimed on my wrist console, Earth requesting scheduling for my visit, not recall, visit. I smiled faintly. It appears I have become inconvenient to categorize. That, she said, is consistent with your neural profile. We both looked out across the city, the defense grid humming steadily beneath it, no longer dependent but forever changed by contact. Was your mission ever truly over? She asked